Hey everyone, my name is Maggie, and I'm so glad you're tuning into Suncrest On Demand. We're wrapping up You in 5 years. Don't worry if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes. You can find them on our YouTube channel. Every week, new people are tuning into Suncrest On Demand. If this is your first time watching with us, welcome. We want to know you're here, so send the word Suncrest to 94,000. For doing that, we'll send you a digital gift card directly to your phone for some coffee. If you don't have it already, you're going to want to download the Suncrest app. That'll give you insider access to things like past content, upcoming events, stuff for your kids, and much, much more. In the app and on our website, you can also partner with us financially. If you want to write a check or give cash, feel free to drop that off at our office this week. Your generosity makes a huge difference in Northwest Indiana and beyond through starting new churches. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you for using your finances to change lives. At the beginning of each year, we have a meeting we call Leaders Edge to look back at the last year and celebrate the work that God has done, and to look forward to where God is going to take our church. If you are interested in knowing how you can be a part of that meeting, check out suncrest.org/leadersedge for all the details. For the last few years, we've celebrated Ash Wednesday. If you've experienced it, you know just how amazing it has been to use this holiday as an event to focus us towards Easter and the resurrection of Jesus. Ash Wednesday is coming up on February 17th, so head to suncrest.org/Ash Wednesday for all of the details. Here's how the rest of this video is going to go. Number 1, we're going to experience some music. Music is a creative way to remind us of the truths of following Jesus. In fact, let us know a lyric you found meaningful in the live chat or comments. Number 2, we're going to experience communion. Each week, we focus on the sacrificial love of Jesus. So, now's the time to gather some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and blood. After the song is done, I'm going to put a timer and some scripture on the screen. Feel free to eat and drink when you are ready. Number 3, after that, we'll hear from lead pastor Greg Lee as he wraps up our series, You in 5 years. Number 4, when that's done, let us know something meaningful you heard in this experience's message. Maybe it's something big, or maybe it's something small. Either way, we want to know. And with that, bring on the music.
Your heart feels like it's caving in, so there the peace begins. Sure as the dawn calls the sun, Jesus, we hear your love call out the light in us. Life like you meant it, I can't contain it. Hope in the here and now. What a wide horizon in the rush of heaven. Life like you made it, I wanna live it wilder than all my dreams. Such a great adventure, welcome to horizon, in the rush of heaven. Life like you made it, I wanna live it wilder than all my dreams. Such a great adventure, welcome to the future. I know who holds, I know who holds, I know who holds tomorrow. Wilder than all my dreams, such a great adventure, welcome to the future.
Hey everybody, it's great to be with you today, and those of you who are joining us online, you can probably imagine one of the things that I love is getting feedback on these messages, to be in conversations, to hear how you're processing them. And we've been in this series for just a little while now called You in 5 Years, and it's been absolutely fascinating to me to see the two different directions the conversations have gone. Some of you are completely embracing this, like I hardly even had to work at it. You sensed a prompting from God and you're on your way. Maybe some of you are just in a place with life where you're honestly dissatisfied and this is teed up to say, yeah, I got to do something different in the next 5 years. I think sometimes it's just a personality thing. About a third of us are wired to live in the past, about a third of us are wired to live in the present, and about a third of us are wired to live in the future. So if you're wired to live in the future, you're set up for something like this. But it's actually something I want all of us to embrace. One of the beautiful things I've seen God do is encounter people who are living, I think, kind of through the blahs of life. Like life just kind of feels the same every day. But this series has prompted something that actually has just been living below the surface. And God is using this experience to cause a breakthrough, to set you on a new course. Some of you have thought about relationships that need to be thought about differently. And 5 years from now, they are going to be different because you're thinking about that. So for all of you who have embraced this, of course, I'm very excited about that. But let's be honest, I've also experienced in my conversations some resistance to this idea. Now, I will tell you, nobody has come up to me and said, Greg, you're an idiot. We shouldn't be thinking about 5 years from now. People don't tend to do that to me, which I'm grateful for. I do pay attention when we get dislikes on YouTube. We got one of those 2 weeks ago. That makes me feel like someone saying, Greg, you're an idiot. But mostly, it's just been passive. And I think, there's lots of reasons why people may not be up for thinking about 5 years from now. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you feel like you've tried this before. Maybe you had a dream once and it crashed and you don't really want to go through that pain again. I understand all of that, but I do want to ask you not to let those feelings or that fatigue stand in the way of embracing something God might have for you. I've lived in Northwest Indiana for over 20 years now, so I feel like I finally have the credibility to call out Northwest Indiana people about Northwest Indiana mindsets. And one of the things I come across all the time is that, Northwest Indiana isn't by nature a place that's full of dreamers, right? Sometimes I joke with people, I'm like, yeah, I talk to people about where their life could be in 5 years, and I feel like I get someone saying like, I don't know, maybe you could go to New Buffalo and have a burger at Redemax. And I think, it's got to be bigger than that. In fact, if you're thinking that way, you should go to New Buffalo in the next 5 days, have your burger, and think about life for the next 5 years. I really want us to see what God might have in store for us. And so, a couple of weeks ago, I asked you to do this, to begin imagining what life will be like in 5 years. And this isn't challenging, really, to just think about where we are now and where we'll be then. Actually, I want to ask you to repeat an exercise we did 2 weeks ago. I'm going to ask everyone, online or here in the room, to say how old you are right now out loud. Now remember, everyone's going to drown everyone else out. Nobody has to hear you. Count to 3. 1, 2, 3. 46. All right, now, simple practice. Add 5 to that. 5 years from now, how old will you be? We're all going to say it out loud again together, even if you're at home. 1, 2, 3. 51. 51, right? Now, I've talked to people about where they're going to be 5 years from now. I had more than one person say, I might be in the ground, Greg. And if that's you, I respect that. But to start to think, 5 years is long enough to experience something significant. There's a quote that floats around, usually attributed to Bill Gates, where he said, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, and most people vastly underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And I'm not even asking you about 10 years. Just 5 years from now, where will you be? Will you live in the same place? Will you be married or not married? What stage of life will your kids be at? 5 years from now. I'll speak about myself just for a moment. 5 years from now, I intend to be here. God can always do whatever he wants to do, but that's where I envision life. But I'll be honest with you, even a little bit when I say here, and I'm standing on this platform on Parish Avenue in St. John, I think, well, 5 years from now, maybe I'll actually be there, meaning in a new facility on our new land and seeing God do an amazing work through that. Who knows? 5 years from now. But I want you to use 2 guiding questions as we wrap this up and lock some things in today. Here's the first question. What will you have done? That's one way to think about life 5 years from now. It's about the external impact you're going to have on the world around us. Of course, as a follower of Jesus, I want you to think about how you would be serving God and serving others. This is an action-oriented plan. And honestly, I'm tempted to give you a lot of examples, and I hesitate to give you a lot of examples all at the same time, because I know whatever examples I use, those could lodge in your mind, and I'm not trying to lead you to my examples. I want you to mourn and fast and pray so that God prompts you with what you might do. But it's not hard to think about possibilities. 5 years from now, some of you could be foster parents, like Jenny and I are foster parents. 5 years from now, you could be running for office somewhere. 5 years from now, you could be reconciled in a relationship that's in a horrible place right now. 5 years from now, you could have moved from the private sector to the nonprofit sector and be doing work that's meaningful in ways that are far beyond what you experience right now. One of the ways to think, honestly, about where you could be, where you should be 5 years from now is just to think, what do I complain about? What bothers me? And think, 5 years from now, I hope I'm part of the solution to whatever I just tend to complain about right now. So some of it could be what you will have done. But there's another way to think about this. The second question is, who will you have become? And this can be a little bit more slippery of a question. But I also want you to know, I think this is more significant. This is about your character and your identity. It's about growth inside of you, not just about doing something. So do not see this second question as a lesser question. It is potentially a greater question. And honestly, my greatest respect for people comes from people who can acknowledge things that are currently in their character and in their makeup internally that need to be transformed. A couple of weeks ago when I started this, I put this graph up on the screen. I call it the burden building scale. And just a brief review, the whole idea here is, for some people in life right now, you're actually a burden to others. You're consuming the resources of this world rather than helping things move forward, and others are moving more forward. When you think about yourself in 5 years, it's not about everybody running for office and changing the world. Maybe that's you. But some of my deepest respect is for people who feel like they're on this far end of the scale down here, where honestly, you feel like I have trouble getting out of bed in the morning. My house is a mess. My room is a mess. My mind is a mess. Depression, fatigue, anxiety, you feel overwhelmed by life right now. And 5 years from now, your aim isn't running for office. Your aim is to move from here to there. And 5 years after that, you can tackle something else. But I want you to know, wherever you are in life right now, God has a plan so that 5 years from now, you could be somebody else. Let me share, this is kind of an odd thing to share, I think, but it's the one that kept coming back to me this week about some things Jenny and I have aimed at. We have some financial goals for our generosity because we think giving money away is one of the ways to change the world. But it didn't start with a number and a plan and what we were going to do. It all started with some work about who we wanted to be. Jenny and I were followers of Jesus. That's been true all of our adult lives. So it was kind of automatic for us. I know it's not automatic for everyone, but it was automatic for us that the first tenth of all of our income, it was going to go to God, no matter what else was going on in our life. That's just trusting God to us. But then we started to look around and think how much God has blessed us and how much we have that most everyone else in the whole world doesn't have. Most everyone else throughout all history hasn't had. And started to think, God, you've been good to us. And then we started to give and we felt how good that felt. And it started to change something inside of us that we wanted to be extraordinarily generous people. It eventually came with a goal, but it actually began with who we wanted to be. And so I want you to think about this. Today, I'm going to ask you to lock in your aim with clarity and with conviction. To take all we've been talking about over the last few weeks and lock in on an image, a picture, an idea of where God wants you to be. Now, clarity on this is very important because fuzziness is not your friend, right? I want you to think about this like if this was water, this is like you have a jet sprayer and it goes with clarity and a point. It knows exactly where it's going. Because, if it's a mist, then it's just going to be messy and your future is going to be foggy. So I'm going to ask you to zero in very clearly on a sense of what God is leading you to do in the next 5 years. That's clarity. But conviction is just equally important because whatever you sense God is leading you to, and you set that course for your life, there will be things that come along the way that will try to distract you from that will create resistance in meeting that goal, even good things that might kind of sway your mind or take you away. So conviction is here too. And for this clarity and conviction, I basically am going to give you 3 tests. I want you to run your image of your life 5 years from now through these tests, and then when we're done today, lock it in. And of course, all of us have to overcome the resistance of that. I actually came across, I thought this picture was pretty funny. This is a note that, someone wants to, go to prom, right? Katie, I have a crush on you. Will you go to prom with me? Circle your answer. He gave her 2 options, and of course, she found the 3rd option. And I bet, knowing this guy, he was not going to give up. So I want you to fight through with your resistance in the same way. Now, we've been using the story of Nehemiah for this. And if you'll remember, Nehemiah mourned and fasted and prayed and got a sense of what God wanted him to do. And then as Dan described last week, he started to go through that process of doing it and faced all kinds of dilemmas along the way that could have tripped him up. Today, I actually want to go to the very end of that story and work it backwards a little bit. And I think that by reverse engineering this story, you'll be able to see these 3 tests of clarity and conviction. So, at the very end of Nehemiah's story, this is what he says. He says, "Remember me for this, my God." This is at the end of his life. God, I aimed at something. You carried me through. It was noble. It made a difference in the world. This is the kind of thing, God. I want you to remember me for this, my God. Whatever you're setting the course of your life on for the next 5 years, you should run it through this grid. Is it the kind of thing where you'd say, and God, this is what I want you to remember me for? See, one of the things this immediately does is it takes the lesser things out of our options. I was joking a couple weeks ago about driving a sophisticated sports car. I don't think any of us would want to be standing before God or at the end of our life and say, God, remember me for this. I drove a sophisticated sports car. And of course, we all have things we'd like to do and like to accomplish in this life. They're not bad things. They're fine. They just don't live up to like a burden of a 5-year goal. One of the things I want to do in life is I want to visit all 50 states. And so far, got 46 down, 4 to go. They're scattered all over the place, so there's not an easy way for me to accomplish this. But this is so weird to me because I think if I got to the end of my life and I said, God, remember me for this. I visited all 50 states. I actually picture it. God's probably not really this way, but I picture God looking down at me like, oh, congratulations, Greg. Hey, angels, did you hear this? Greg Lee made it to all 50 states. Shouldn't we all just celebrate what Greg has done here? Listen, you can come across some goals and things you want to do in life that do not fit the idea that at the end of your life, you'd say, you know what, God? This is what I did. This is what I want you to remember me for. This is the mark of my life. And Nehemiah was at a place at the very end of his life where there was that thin line between being on this side of death and the other side of death. And on this side of death, we say, God, remember me for this. And then you breathe your last and you pass your way to the other side of death and you stand before God to talk with him about what you did with your life. And I want you to aim at something over the next 5 years so that at the end of your life or that time when you cross over to the next life and you come face to face with God, you'll be able to say to him, this is what I aimed at. See, this is the test. It's a test of significance. That my aim will be honorable when I stand before God. Now think about this. If you have brokenness inside your life right now, and you know, you need to experience some transformation in who you are, and you do that work, and you trust God, and you open yourself up to him, you could stand before God one day and say, God, remember me. Do you see the work that I was willing to go through to become the kind of person you want me to be? And maybe you're in a place right now where you feel like, yeah, in your own life, things aren't broken. I mean, we all have our stuff, but it's not dramatic. And you have enough kind of bandwidth then to look around at the rest of the world and say, well, what's broken in the world? And when you start to tackle things that are not the way God wants them to be in this world, and you lead and you become part of the solution to that, I think you would get to the end of your life and you'd be able to say, God, remember me for the way I engaged all that brokenness in the world. But there are definitely people, I mean, maybe these are the same people who are resisting an aim for 5 years from now, who they don't feel like they have that much brokenness in their own life. And when they look around at the world, they're like, yeah, it's a broken place, but I'm not all that interested. I want to do my own thing. And I just want to be honest with you. If you're not a follower of Jesus, maybe that makes perfect sense. I don't know. You have to think about the world the way you think about the world. But if you're a follower of Jesus, and your life is in a healthy enough place that you could serve this broken world, but you're choosing not to, I don't know how else to say it except that you are the problem with American Christianity. Put your life into something so that when you pass through from this life to the next, you'll be able to say, God, remember me. That's what I aimed at. That's how I served you. Let me rewind Nehemiah's story just a little bit further. This is after he had accomplished the building of the wall and restoring the wall of Jerusalem. He's kind of reflecting on it. He says, when all our enemies heard about this, even that phrase is interesting. It assumes that, this is not a solo journey, that whatever you set your course on 5 years from now, you will not do it in isolation, or at least you shouldn't think about doing something you could do in isolation. This has an our element to it, meaning, you're going to need some people who are around you, people to support you and guide you and love you and provoke you and warn you and support you, all those things. You want to have people who have your back, and you want to have people who stand shoulder to shoulder with you. That's how we actually do the things God wants us to do in this world. Just at the end of this past year, December 31st, I was sitting reflecting on all of 2020. And I just felt overwhelmed. I just had to send a message to all of our staff and all of our elders. And I just said this. I said, thank you. We've made it through the year. We've seen God do amazing things. And you've had my back, and we've stood shoulder to shoulder. And it's beautiful what can happen in a we, our, plural environment. But this sentence doesn't just say what's going on with the people who are with me. It references that there will be enemies. You should be absolutely aware of this when you set the course for these next 5 years, that not everyone will want you to succeed. Some will do that out of sinister intent. Some will do it because they're clueless. Some because they're selfish. But you will face resistance. And then the passage, this is so fascinating. It goes on, it says, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence. Why? Here's why. Because they realized that this work had been done with the help of God. This work has been done with the help of God. And whatever you're aiming at for 5 years from now, I want to simply ask you to make sure you aim at it understanding God is part of the equation. This is not something you're aiming at that you could completely do on your own. In fact, the test here is actually a test of surrender. The idea of surrender here is that my aim will not be so low that I could do it on my own. One of the things that we have to figure out in life is when we're tackling anything, what's my part? I have a responsibility. And what's God's part? And what's someone else's part? And one of the things I notice about myself, maybe this is how you are too, is when I start to put together a plan for tackling something, I almost always calculate my part, but I could be prone to leave out God's part. But whatever you're aiming at, if you're going to have clarity and conviction about this, I'm asking you to aim at something that is beyond what you could do on your own. Something that you could only do with God's help. You see how significant this is, right? I mean, the New Testament says from God, my righteous one will live by faith. And if he shrinks back, I will not be pleased with him. That if your approach to life is calculations and spreadsheets, that you will have to bust out of that for a moment and add in the variable that is God and his power and his presence. Friends, you got to hear me say this. If you wake up tomorrow morning and the only thing you tackle tomorrow morning are things that you could do without God, you're going to miss out on so much of life. The whole idea behind faith in God is that we would step into dreams, step into callings from God that we couldn't do on our own, that will absolutely require his presence and his power to be with us. that we do these things not on our own, but by definition, with God's help. And so what's your dream for 5 years from now? I pray it includes something of God. Now, let me tell you this is kind of goofy, but this is the story of how Jenny and I went through this generosity journey to become the kind of people who were generous. I remember I was 26 years old, and I was serving this church at the time. I was making about $25,000 a year. Jenny had just finished school. She started a teaching job. She was making about $25,000 a year. So we were making $50,000 a year. And there was a cause that was in front of us that made us think we want to go beyond just giving that 10% to God. And we decided that year, out of our $50,000, we could be generous with $10,000 of it. And we saw what God did, and we felt how it felt. And it did something in us that started to create a vision for the future. And it's kind of a weird conversation, but I remember thinking with her, like, you know what, honey? Let's never give less than that amount in a year ever again. Let's make sure we're always giving at least $10,000 a year. And we went through some times where it would have been easy to back off on that conviction, but we didn't. We wanted to be generous people. And then this is how my mind works, right? I'm like, oh, what could happen over the long term? And then you start thinking, well, I'm 26 years old. I'm probably going to work for another 40 years. If I give $10,000 a year for 40 years, that's like $400,000. Like that, I could stand before God and say, God, this is the way we were generous. And then I thought, but we should go beyond that. And I'm probably going to make more money. And Jenny's going to make more money in the future. Let's even push that a little bit. Let's go to $500,000. And I remember this whole conversation with Jenny, like maybe we could be those kind of people. And then it hit me. I'm working off a spreadsheet. Like I think I could actually do that without God being involved at all. I think I could. And then we just doubled it. And this is what I want to ask you to do. If you're dreaming of something and you're thinking, man, maybe God, maybe I could do this, but you've realized, actually, I've calculated what I could do, but I haven't asked for God's help yet. Then maybe what you're aiming at in 5 years, it just needs to step up a little bit, because my aim will not be so low that I can do it on my own. Add a zero, double it, whatever it is to you. Just say, God, I want to be on the right aim, and I want to set it at the right scale, because I want to do something only you could do. That's the story of Nehemiah. Let me back up in his story just one bit further. This is, I think, the moment in Nehemiah's story where it was either going to go right or it was all going to fall apart. Nehemiah was literally on the wall. They're building this wall around Jerusalem. He was doing the work. They had a deadline. He had a conviction. They were aiming at something. And there were people who were off the wall who wanted Nehemiah's attention. They said, hey, come down and meet with us. Some of them had sinister motives. Maybe others just wanted to have a conversation. And this is how the passage goes. He says, I sent messengers to them with this reply. I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? And I want you to zero in on this middle phrase. I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. I am carrying on a great project and I cannot go down. I am reconciling a relationship that is broken. And I know there are other things that could be done. I know there's other things that could get my attention, but I cannot stop reconciling this relationship that is broken. I want to be the kind of person who's making a difference in the world. I'm making a commitment to being part of the healing of that brokenness, and I cannot come down. Now, it happens all the time in Christian circles, because Christians, we're kind of prone to try to be nice, not a horrible thing. But sometimes you feel like you have to meet every need and every distraction that comes along. And what Nehemiah is giving you the permission to do here, not just the permission, I think the commission to do here, is to say no to other things, to say no to other people, to say no to other requests, so that you can say yes to the God-given vision inside of you for 5 years from now. I am carrying on a great project, and I cannot come down from here. I don't know what you're saying. I am fighting for my mental health right now. I am working through my anxiety and my depression. I'm getting the mess of my life back together. And no, I will not go out with you. I will not be distracted by this. I cannot come down from here. Maybe you're a person who has seen the brokenness in the world and it bothers you, and randomly you've served it before. You know, if it works to come on a Serve Saturday, that's awesome, and you do that. But in the next 5 years, the difference, this is who you're becoming, is you're saying, I'm actually going to be the kind of person who commits to a group of people, to doing something day in and day out, week in and week out. I'm going to be committed to something. And then distractions are going to present themselves. And someone's going to want you to do this instead or that instead. And I'm telling you, this will take conviction to say, I am carrying on a great project, and I cannot come down from there. You know, Jenny and I have this generosity value that we're trying to live out. And a number of years ago, someone that we love came to us and said, hey, Greg and Jenny, we're going to buy a place in Florida, and we wondered if you would want to go in on it with us. And I said to him immediately, I said, I think you overestimate our financial capacity. And he said, no. He said, like, you can go 50-50 if you want, but you know, whatever works for you. If it's 60-40, if it's 90-10, if it's 95-5, it could just be a good investment for you. You could have a place to go to in Florida. And of course, he asked me in January, why wouldn't you ask someone in January who lives in Northwest Indiana if they'd like to go in on a place in Florida? And I got to tell you, for at least a little while, I thought, hey, Jenny, maybe we should do this. Maybe. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better opportunity. Except that what looked like a great opportunity and had plenty of fine things about it would have also caused us to come down from here, from this generosity value and the God-given goal that we think that He's given us. And so, because there is conviction, the decision's already made. Listen, you should not suppose for a moment that if you have a God-given dream over the next 5 years, that it will be embraced by everyone around you. Instead, the test will be this: to remain steadfast, that my aim will not yield to earthly things. And that will come with friction, relational friction with some people. It will come with conflict. It will come with resistance. But because you have this conviction, you will say, I'm carrying on a great project, and I cannot come down from here. And so I just want to offer you this chance here at the end of this series to get clear and gain some conviction on what your aim is 5 years from now. At the bottom of this outline, you'll see a box. And, you know, I picture it actually just as kind of like a sheet of paper like this. And I want to ask you within the next hour or two to start to jot out your next 5 years in a picture. The picture probably includes where you will be. Maybe it's even a physical location. Probably includes some people around you who will be necessary to do this with. And definitely a picture of what you will be doing. But sometimes I feel that even better than writing out a sentence or a paragraph, drawing a picture helps me to have a vision for what God wants me to do. And so that's what I want to leave you with today, with a chance to reflect and think, where will you be 5 years from now?
I hope this series has been as meaningful for you as it has been for us. Join us next week as we kick off a new series called Be Rich. We know that finances can be complicated. We also know that you want to get them right. We think Jesus has some pretty helpful things to say about how to use, think about, and manage our finances, and we want to help you know that information. So, join us next week for the start of Be Rich. And don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons before you leave. Every week we say this, but I really do hope that you know that this video isn't the church. You are. So go and be the church.